Welcome to a playthrough of MBT, Main Battle Tank from GMT. Part of my playthrough series where I'm highlighting old and new Cold War tactical games. This one being a newer game, MBT, the 2016 version. And we'll be playing the first scenario of this, which is going to be very similar to the first scenario of Firefight that we played in a previous video. If you haven't seen that video, please take a look and take a view at that. That shows the old 1976 version of Firefight and some of the early Modern War series that the SPI was putting out. I have picked the first scenario here because it's very similar to the first scenario that we played with Firefight. Similar set of tank versus tank, small company-sized battle between the two sides. Just to kind of highlight the similarities, differences, and how it's evolved with the systems. So just to give an introduction here, what I want to do is kind of go through this scenario, show you the similarities, everything, how the setup's going to be, and then take you into the setup and get playing from there. So with that, let's get started. So first off, the scenario. Let me bring up the scenario here for this. And it's going to be the first scenario, first clash, Czech border, 27 September 1987, where we're basically having two tank companies in a meeting engagement attacking each other. So this is a little bit different than what we had in the Firefight, where Firefight was a attack defense type of situation. This is more of a meeting engagement where both sides will be moving in and attacking each other. But we will be having the same type of forces here. If we look at our forces, we have U.S. Tank Company from the 1st Division Mechanized. And you can see we have roughly 2, 6, 9, 12, 15 U.S. tanks versus 4, 8, 12, 13 Soviet tanks. Both are seasoned. That's a difference that we have here too, is we have a quality component in here. We didn't have a quality component in the Firefight play that we had. So that's a little bit of a difference within here as well. Obviously, we have a lot more differences that we'll highlight here too in terms of moving capabilities, technology capabilities, and other things that we'll see within here. So this is played on basically 3 maps, which I'll share the maps here in a second. I have that set up on Vassal, so you can see here in a second. And the victory is going to be points. A little bit different than Firefight, where we're looking to capture or destroy units. This is going to be capturing terrain for victory points, and then also destroying units for victory points. And whoever has the most wins within there. I'll highlight the actual victory locations here once we look at the maps. We'll be playing with both, from an MBT perspective, the basic, advanced, and some optional rules in here, just to kind of show you some of the more richness that you can get coming out of MBT than you did have within the Firefight battle. Comes at a price though. It's going to take us, it's going to be a little bit slower, a little bit more calculating, not as quick as the playthrough of the Firefight. Firefight we played through roughly that one scenario in about an hour with me commenting and showing you the battle on here. This is going to take a bit longer with that. Hopefully we'll be done within 2 to 3 hours worth of video time on there as well, but we'll see how it plays out. Our maps, as I said, are going to be a lot richer than what we had with content than what we had, with Firefight. So let's go over to the maps and I'll show you here. Let's just get those off of here for a second. So here are our 3 maps. We've got map 4 aligned next to map 2, which is aligned next to map 7. So the 2 ends of the boards, this is one end of the board, This is the other end of the board, and per the scenario setup, we will have the Americans or the Soviets come over on this side and the opposite come over on the other side over here. And they will need to control several points that I have highlighted over here for victory points, as well as knock out tanks for victory points here as well. So let's take a look at this. I'll zoom in here a little bit. You can see this. There's several. There's two spots over here. There's a bridge and a ford that will constitute one set of victory points. There are two bridges over here, which I think that's 250, by the way. And then there's two bridges over here, which concentrate 300 victory points, and then one ford over here, which is going to be worth 200 points. And those are all in the middle of the board, as we saw before. As I zoom back out, this is the middle of board 2. So both sides will either have to cross one board to get there, as well as position to repel or attack the enemy, the other side's units. Okay, so that's our board. That's our victory conditions on here. Now the other contrast, as we saw with the firefight, if you looked at that video, the firefight board was rather plain in terms of what terrain features that we had on there. We did have some hills, as we have hills here, and there's a lot of hills over on this end. We did have towns like we have here and here. We did have woods that you can see that we have both here and up here and over here and in other various spots around here as well. But now we add in the river, which we did have a river, but it really didn't play into the combat. But we also have ridges here, fields, crop fields, scrub hexes, rough hexes for units to go in, brush hexes, that's this here, trails, as we have over here, and just various other things that kind of inhibit either our movement or our line of sight or anything that we're doing in here. And it's going to play into this, and we're going to use that quite a bit here as we're maneuvering around. So that's one big difference, just the richness in terms of the boards that we'll be able to set up and play with. The other thing that's going to be much richer is the units themselves. So let's take a look at what we're going to be using. We're only using 2 units, and you could see them there when I had the setups here. We've got T-72s, AVs, and then M60A3 TTS. TTS stands for Tank Thermal Sights. That's going to be important, as I will explain here in a second. So, those are the 2 sets. We're going to have 2 companies. We're going to have, which are going to be made up of 3 platoons for the Soviets, and then 4 platoons for the U.S. A little bit different composition. There'll be 4, 3, 3, 3 tanks, and then a command unit over here. Notice there's no command unit for the Soviets. That is because we will utilize the very nice solo rules that are within the Panzer MBT line of games. That's the ones that actually set up and help you manage what the opposite side is going to do based upon the current situation on the map. It's a little bit more intricate, takes some time to get used to, but it's very good at helping you guide how the other side is going to play. Because of that, there is no command units in there. The command is kind of baked into the solo rules. Okay, so you'll see that more as we get into the game, and I explain more at that point. But right now, the technology that we're using with both the tanks, let's take a look at the technology at the cards. That's a difference here as well. We have individual cards in the Panzer MBT series for the different tanks that we're using that actually explain their statistics, capabilities, and other things that are associated with the tanks. Here we have our T-72s, and you can see the offensive information down here in the middle, defensive information down here, essentially the armor, and this is the guns. And then we have just up here the other information about the tanks here as well, and then a silhouette, top-down silhouette of the tank. Now, a couple things to note. We'll get with this with a lot more richness is we have capabilities up here at the top in terms of our tank, its movement capabilities. Up here, we can see it has a movement of 7 cross country, 9 on a path or track, and 14 on a road. So we have a little bit different movement capabilities on here. You can see we've got a weight, transport capabilities, the actual gun designation, 125 millimeter L48 gun, turret capabilities, stabilization capabilities here, sighting, rate of fire, ammunition, special ammunition that we can see over here as well, heat, that's the H4, and also D5, which is a smoke discharger. So you can see just by me describing this, there's a lot more richness to this. There's a lot more capabilities that we have in here. Again, comes with a cost. A lot more to remember, a lot more to use, but it gives a lot more detail to the action that we'll have. Also, our gun ratings are going to be much different. If you note over here, the biggest one, if you haven't played Panzer or MBT, to note is right here. This is our main ammunition that we're going to be shooting. The armor piercing, discarding sabot, FS I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's okay. And then this is showing an R and a P, that's our range, and our penetration value. Penetration value is going to be how well it goes through the armor. That's this stuff down here for the T-72, but how well it goes through the American armor, which we'll take a look at next over here. Which leads us to the armor. We have down here, this is our armor capabilities, what the type of penetration is through various angles of the tank, turret front, turret rear, hull front, hull rear, and then sides, and then decks, and then based upon a rise, fall, or level, think of that as up, down, or straight ahead, as well as introducing special types of armor, like composite armor, that's this here, and explosive reactive armor here as well. So some of these we won't get into with this particular scenario, but just trying to introduce and show you, again, the richness that we're going to be able to get out of this, and I think it'll show on there, again, at the expense of more complexity and more time to play. Quick look at the American tanks. Here's the M60A3 TTS. Again, tank thermal sight is what that is. Big difference on this, with this, is our sighting. We get to use thermal sights, which means we can shoot through smoke. That's going to become important because the thermal sights reduce the hindrance of smoke, so that the negative modifier on that is much, much less, and there's a very good chance that the M60 can hit the other tank, the Soviet tanks, through smoke, which is a highly useful tactic here, as we'll see. Similar card layout in terms of the gun and the armor. Make note of the American armor is much weaker. You notice it's only 48, 48, 10 for the hull front, turret front. Very vulnerable to hits. If we look back at the Soviets and the guns, 125 millimeter, look at that penetration, 108, 97, 86, 73, 60. This can penetrate the armor of an M60 at any range, 33 hexes. That is extremely long. That's 3 kilometers, over 3 kilometers. It can still penetrate that tank. So we're going to be very careful on that. Converse side of things, if we look at the American side, their penetration, 110, 96, 86, 78, 72. You'll notice here, 86. Look at some of these armors. Turret front 90, turret hull 80, turret front, side front of the turret is 105. So the Americans are going to need to get very close. They're going to have be in medium range or less to actually get some decent penetration on the T-72 tanks. So these are important pieces that you're going to have to remember as we're playing this, and that's what gives it much more richness to this, because now we're using technology to hopefully help the Americans who have deficiencies with their armor be able to, hit at a punch at a higher level, because they will have some other technological capabilities to help get them in close so they can defeat the armor over in here. Okay, so enough about the technology. We'll see this as it comes through. The other thing that's going to be a difference here is going to be our sequence of play. Let me go over to the charts here. Where are we here? This is the MBT. I know where they are. Here it is. So the sequence of play, similar but different than Firefight. Firefight was very simple. It was this, we roll for the fire phase, and then whoever goes first, each takes shots, and then back and forth. Same thing's going to happen here when we get to the combat phase and the movement phase down here. But we do have some other phases around it, like the spotting phase, command phase, initiative phase, air phase. This actually has aircraft as opposed to the Firefight the original Firefight that didn't, and then the adjustment phase at the back. Now, the adjustment phase, there was something similar like that in Firefight for that. But similar, where we're going to be going back and forth based upon dice rolls. Also going to introduce a staggered initiative, which kind of helps a little bit to balance out the randomness of the initiative phase over here. So we will be seeing that in here. But the other biggest thing that's going to be a difference is we are going to have to control our tanks through commands. And we will be limited on the number of commands we can use. So it's going to be a little bit trickier for us to manage our forces and make sure our forces stay in command. And we'll see that as we go along. But very similar from the standpoint of combat phase, back and forth, movement phase, back and forth, for how we're going to be playing. Okay, so that's pretty much what our setup is going to be. Now, I also said I'm going to be using some solo rules. What we're going to be using is some modifications to the solo rules for Panzer. Now, this is the write-up that I've done for this. This is based upon my conversion of this particular scenario to a solo scenario. I've done this for several of the Panzers. I've also done this for some of the MBTs here as well. I'm going to be using this. This is the first time I've done it with this one, so I kind of wrote this up quickly. But basically, we're going to have the Soviets being the enemy force. They're going to be the one controlled by the bot. We are going to be Americans, which are the friendly forces, which means we're going to be in control of that. We're going to do all the commands. We're going to be moving them, so forth and so on. Soviets will have 8 hidden units to represent the 3 platoons of 4 times T-72 AV tanks. And the setup is going to be dictated by a couple of dice rolls, and whichever edge the Soviets wind up on, they will set up in the appropriate hexes here and here. Essentially, this will be along the roads that we saw on the map. I won't go back and show you the hexes. We'll see that as a setup, but it will be there. It will be on the roads in terms of how they set up. Then I just have some other things here in terms of how they'll move. Basically, the Soviet tanks are going to be moving along the roads until they make contact with the Americans. At that point, they make contact. Either they spot, we spot, or we both spot. Then they can start to become autonomous, and the individual tanks can now move in regards to their platoons and in regards to what our actions are going to be within there. And that's what this all talks about over in here. So that's how it's going to work. So a little bit of a twist on the solo rules coming out of Panzer. we're still going to have hidden units, but they're going to represent the platoons. Once the platoons are discovered, then they will become autonomous from there. Okay, so that is a little bit of background of that. Hopefully some of you have watched the firefight. You're seeing some familiarity, similarity, I should say, not familiarity, similarity to what we saw in firefight. And well, let's get started with this, and I'll do a setup. I'll do the setup here, and then move along from there. We can get moving down the road. Okay, so the actual setup here, let me walk through it. I've done a log in Vassal, and we're going to roll for the board edges. Soviet's going to be odd, American's going to be even, and all again based upon my solo rules. So I roll a 10, which is an even, American's choice. So I chose board 7 down here, and we're going to set up over here. And what I chose to do, after a few range checks here, I chose to put them all on this road. We'll zoom in here so you can see this a little bit more. Whoops. Maybe a little bit too much. They're all starting out on this wooded road coming off of board 7. They're all within 3 hexes of the board edge. So my plan for this is that I am going to have them come up the road, which, again, referencing it, is here. They're going to come up this road up through here, eventually get to this point, evaluate the situation in front of them, because they will be able to see this bridge and a lot of this area in here. If the Soviets have moved down in this area already, we'll see what happens. But then have a portion come up here to go after these victory hexes up here. Another portion to go after this one and this one as my primary attacks. All while having command units provide overwatch and cover fire. Command and other platoons provide overwatch and cover fire from positions, within this area here. As well as over here once we cross this woods line right there. Then from there they'll branch out and try to go for the ford up here, again defeating any Soviet units as quickly as possible, within there. That's going to be my plan for the whole thing. Now the Soviets, again, they're going to be the autonomous bot side of things, the enemy player. They're going to set up on these roads here. Actually, you can see one unit I got in there here and over here. So let's get the Soviets set up here as I walk through. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7. Come on, 7, and 8 right there. All right, so those little red blocks here, here, and here represent the potential of one of these platoons. There's 8 of them on here. There's only 3 platoons. That allows for fake units to come down the road and either appear or not. Hopefully we will find all 3. They may all be on this road. They may be split up between all 3 roads. We just don't know. In terms of how it's gonna work out, and that's kind of a little bit of the fog of war that the solo bot allows us to play with. And that, I think, basically should be it. Yeah, that's it for the setup. So we're all set up here. We're the Americans down here to the south, right down in here. Oops, right down in here. Coming up through the road, I kind of explained my plan of attack. Soviets are going to try to, go for these hexes, and these hexes, and over here, and we're going to see what happens as we go from there. So that's it for the setup and the introduction. Hopefully you like this. Stay tuned for turn 1.